Well, hey guys, welcome back to another episode of Automotive Insight. So after a lot of feedback from you guys and after some shenanigans with YouTube and copyright and yada, 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 we're finally getting back to our ASE test prep series. So basically what happened was we took questions from a website, put them in video form, answered them, and published the video. Somebody from that website complained to YouTube, and we had to take them down. So what we did to regroup was we asked ChatGPT to make us some questions. And we had to do a bunch of different modification of inputs and stuff to finally get some realistic, decent questions, but we finally got them, and so we're going to get back to that. Now, the only drawback is there's going to be less questions, which is kind of a drawback because it's not the 60 to 75 that we were doing before, but there will be a lot less work on our end. Those took a long time to make. So anyway, we're going to get back into it. Today we're going to be knocking out the A4, which is steering and suspensions. All right, question 1. A vehicle exhibits a clunking noise when driving over bumps and has poor handling. What component is most likely at fault? A, worn control arm bushings, B, a faulty power steering pump, C, uneven tire pressure, or D, a misalignment. So, A, worn control arm bushings, that makes perfect sense. My immediate thought would be strut mounts, but strut mounts is not on here, but it says noise going over bumps and poor handling. Yeah, lower control arm bushings, upper control arm bushings can absolutely cause that. Faulty power steering pump, that's not the only noise that it would give you is like a whining type of noise. Sometimes they'll kind of chatter a little bit while turning, but really going over bumps, it's not going to have anything to do with that. Uneven tire pressure, you're not going to get a clunking noise. If you've got a tire that's lower than other, it might cause some type of a whining type of noise, road noise while driving it, but you're not going to get a like a clunking noise. You might get some weird handling, but not the clunking noise. And vehicle out of alignment, that might cause poor handling, but it's not going to cause a clunking noise either. So the answer is A, worn control arm bushings.
So question 2. Two technicians are discussing camber angle during alignment. Tech A says camber inward is negative. Tech B says camber outward is positive. Who is correct? Tech A, Tech B, both, or D, neither. So camber inward, that's Tech A is correct. That is negative. Camber outward is positive. So that's kind of a simple question. The correct answer is C, both.
Number 3. A driver notices that the steering wheel vibrates excessively at highway speeds. Which of the following is the most probable cause? A, worn wheel bearings, B, out of balance tires, C, leaking power steering fluid, or D, faulty shock absorbers. So, worn wheel bearings, 99% of the time are just going to give you like a noise issue. Every now and then you might have one that's causing like a pull or something if it's really dragging, but generally speaking, wheel bearings are not going to cause a vibration issue. Out of balance tires will absolutely cause a vibration issue. Leaking power steering fluid, the fact that it says at highway speeds is going to kind of rule out the power steering chatter that you might have if you had like air in the lines or whatever, because when you're driving down the interstate or at highway speeds, you have virtually no power assist at that point, so you can pretty much rule that out. And faulty shock absorbers, unlikely. Basically, the role of the shock is to control the spring rate. So you might have some excessive bounciness when you're hitting things that are uneven. But as far as like a persistent kind of repetitive or duplicatable vibration issue like they're talking about, that is usually going to be something that's rotating, which the tires make sense, or maybe like a CV axle or a drive shaft or something. But of all those answers, out of balance tires makes the most sense, so the answer is B.
Question 4. A vehicle exhibits a pulling sensation to one side while driving straight. Which of the following could be a likely cause? A. Incorrect tire pressure. B. Misaligned headlights. C. Faulty brake caliper. D. Worn out shock absorbers. So what they're talking about is your steering wheel straight without having to kind of steer the vehicle. The vehicle probably pulls and wanders off the side of the road.
Rule out headlights immediately.
Yeah. So that is some kind of, this is just a chat GPT kind of really far out there kind of thing on the headlights. But incorrect tire pressure, that's very possible. Faulty brake caliper. Now, if the caliper is sticking, yeah, that could cause a pull to the side. D, worn out shock absorbers. No, because that's there just to control the oscillation of the tires. So this is down to kind of two answers. But the most likely cause is probably the incorrect tire pressure.
Right. That's the most likely cause.
Most likely cause.
But the caliper will cause it.
It will.
Number 5. The vehicle's steering feels loose and unresponsive. What is a likely cause of this issue? A. Worn tie rod ends. B. Loose wheel bearings. C. Leaking power steering fluid. Or D. A loose drive belt. So, worn tie rod ends makes perfect sense. You're going to have a lot of slop in the wheel. So that makes sense. Wheel bearings could maybe give you that sensation, but generally speaking, like we had talked about on an earlier question, they usually give other symptoms. Matter of fact, one symptom that you oftentimes won't hear about a wheel bearing is if you've got one that's got a ton of play on it, it'll actually push the caliper pistons back in. So you'll go make a turn and it'll push the pistons back in, and it'll give you a low brake pedal that first time. So usually you have other symptoms than that with a loose wheel bearing. So I'm going to discount that for the time being. Power steering fluid is going to give you low power steering fluid is going to give you the exact opposite effect. You are going to lose any type of assist, and it's going to feel really tight. And a loose belt tension, same thing. That's going to be assuming you have like a hydraulic style. You're going to basically be losing power assist. So of all those, worn tie rods makes the most sense. So A is the answer.
Question 6. After replacing a strut assembly, which procedure should be performed to ensure proper alignment and vehicle handling? A. Adjust the tow angle only. B. Perform a four-wheel alignment. C. Check the brake fluid level. D. Refill the power steering fluid. A. Adjust the tow angle. Sure, you're going to want to do an alignment after suspension repairs. There have been times that I've gotten away without doing it and the vehicle's driven fine, but it is a good idea to do it. Question B is perform a four-wheel alignment. Yes, that's correct. C, check brake fluid level. That really doesn't have to do anything with the suspension repair unless you nick the brake line while doing it and then you got to replace it. Sure, then you got to do that. And then refill the power steering fluid. That's not correct. So the correct answer is B, perform four-wheel alignment.
Yeah, alignment's right in the question.
Yeah.
So, yeah, when you have a strut off, you're going to be changing the camber. That's why, like he said, sometimes you do get away with it. I mean, cars have pretty tight tolerances these days. And so, yeah, there's been plenty of times I've put struts on a car, stuck it up on the alignment rack, and the camber is fine. But the answer that they want is to do an alignment because you're supposed to do an alignment after you do struts anyway. Number 7. After a recent alignment, the vehicle still pulls to one side. What could be the most likely cause? A. Misadjusted camber angle. B. Improper caster angle. C. Worn suspension bushings. Or D. A worn CV axle joint. So while A and B, improper or misadjusted caster and camber, could cause this, we're assuming that they set it. I mean, they just did an alignment, so we would know that we're assuming here that the camber and caster were addressed during the alignment. So A and B, we're going to rule that out because it should have been fixed. C, worn suspension bushings, absolutely. Control arm bushings, if you a lot of times control arm bushings they're kind of weird in that if you're just kind of coasting down the road, they're at one position. If you put a little bit of acceleration on them, they'll kick the lower control arm bushings in, or if you brake, they'll kick them out, which is changing your toe and stuff. So yeah, worn suspension makes perfect sense. I'm assuming they're talking about like control arm bushings. And worn CV joint, they don't really cause pulling. They tend to cause either noise or like vibrations under load, or really any vibration, but usually like a vibration under a load. So the answer would be C, worn suspension bushings.
Question 8. Which symptom is most likely to indicate worn out ball joints? A, a clunking noise when turning. B, vibrations through the steering wheel. C, excessive tire wear on the inner edges. D, difficulty engaging the transmission. So you can go ahead and eliminate D.
D's
That's
nothing.
just unrelated to the suspension. A, a clunking noise when turning. Yeah, worn out suspension components can make a lot of noise, especially ball joints. Vibrations through the steering wheel. That's no, that's very unlikely. That's most likely probably a tire issue or maybe a warped rotor issue. Excessive tire wear on the inner edges. That is a byproduct of worn out ball joints, but usually they got to be really worn out, about to fall off the car before they get that bad. But the correct answer is A, clunking noise when turning. Worn out ball joints do tend to be noisy, and you also tend to have squeaks and creaks with them. And if usually you hear that if you hear like a Ford Explorer or Crown Vic turning and they're squeaking, their ball joints are about to fall out the car.
Mm-hmm. Number 9, you notice uneven tire wear with excessive wear on the inner edges of the tire. What is the most likely issue? A, excessive toe in. B, excessive camber. C, incorrect caster angle. Or D, worn out sway bar links. So, rule out caster and sway bar links immediately. Caster does not affect any tire wear issue. That is simply a pulling and or steering wheel return function that caster is responsible for. So rule out C and D. I had to double check this. I had to reread this question because my first thought was toe, but A says excessive toe in, and it says that you notice uneven tire wear on the inner edges. So if the car is towed in, you're actually going to be wearing the outer edges of the tire. And that was another thing that threw me off, was it said edges instead of like an edge on one tire. But toe in is going to cause problems on the outside edges of the tire. So of the 4 options, excessive camber, that's the only one that makes any sense. You've got, well, it would actually be negative camber because your camber would have to be in at the top, but camber is the one that makes the most sense. So B is the correct answer.
Tech A says incorrect toe out on turn causes tires to drag sideways during turns. Tech B says incorrect toe out on turns is caused by a bent strut assembly. Who is correct? Tech A, Tech B, C, both, or D, neither. So Tech A, toe out on turns is basically as both wheels are turning, are they both sort of pointing in the same direction? Incorrect toe out is one tire is turning more than the other, which even if you weren't, even if your toe is incorrect, like we just talked about the last question, you're dragging your tire, and that can happen on your toe out. That is usually caused by bent steering component usually like a knuckle, like right there at the wheel. Tech B, that is incorrect, because most of the time tow out is it's part of the rack and pinion, the steering, and the knuckle assembly, not the strut part of it. So the correct answer is A only.
Number 11. After sitting all night, when the vehicle is started, the vehicle's steering response is sluggish until the vehicle is warmed up. What could be causing this? A, low power steering fluid, B, loose ball joints, C, loose tie rod ends, or D, worn sway bar links. So A makes perfect sense. Basically, the car is cold and the fluid level is low. Once that fluid warms up, it's going to expand a little bit and then be the correct fluid level. So that makes perfect sense. Ball joints, unaffected by temperature, so that's not going to really.
Except for noise, I have seen noise, temperature. Ball joints make noise because colder or hotter. I have seen that before.
But as far as making the steering wheel feel sluggish, not really. Same goes with tie rod ends. They're not really going to have any effect on. They're not going to be affected by temperature, and same thing with sway bar links. B, C, and D really aren't going to cause that based on a temperature. It's not going to go away when the car warms up. So the answer is A, low power steering fluid. You got a leak somewhere.
Question 12. Customer states their vehicle is hard to steer at low vehicle speeds. Which is most likely the cause? A, low power steering fluid. B, faulty power steering pump. C, weak belt tensioner. Or D, faulty strut mounts. This is kind of a hard one because
all of those are possibilities.
So which is most likely the cause? And usually what I do is I associate usually other symptoms that the customer will probably have told you during, like, it's just, instead of, I'm also hearing a noise or something else like that, or I've had to add fluid. So, but if they're just saying that it's just hard to steer at low vehicle speeds, low power steering fluid, usually you get a noise, excessive noise. Was it usually it whines?
Usually whine.
And there's,
or for Ford, normal.
Yeah, leaking fluid in the driveway. Usually you get something along the lines of that. Faulty power steering pump. I've seen them weak, and usually they don't make any noise. They operate at a lower pressure. So B is possible. C, weak belt tensioner. Usually you can get a chatter with that one. You can get belt squeal out of that. So there's usually extra symptoms that go along.
A lot of times that'll kind of get better with temperature as well. You'll usually get a little more grip on it when it's warmed up.
And sometimes the alternator will slip too, so you might get occasional battery warning message and then also squealing with excess electronics. D, faulty strut mounts. That can cause hard steering, but that'd have to be pretty extreme. Usually most of the time issues out of strut mounts are usually noise.
And not only that, at speeds, if you have like a bad bearing on the top of it, speed's going to have no effect on that at all. Yeah. It's going to be just as hard to turn at highway speeds as it is at low speed anyway.
Your steering would probably feel notchy, like, kind of. Anyway, that's on the extreme side of it. But the correct answer would be a faulty power steering pump. So.
Number 13. Tech A says that a steering wheel vibration can be caused by unbalanced tires. Tech B says that a steering wheel vibration could be caused by worn out shock absorbers. Who is correct? A, B, both, or neither. So this goes back to our keywords like could, should, can be, never, always. So Tech A says that steering wheel vibration could be caused by unbalanced tires. That's correct. Tech B says that the vibration could be caused by worn out shocks. it's not as likely, but it could be. I mean, if they're just going along for the ride, you're on somewhat of a bumpy road or whatever, they're just going to be bouncing the shock or the springs around. So could be is where that comes in. So the answer is C, both.
2 technicians are discussing steering angle sensors after an alignment. Tech A says steering angle sensors need to be calibrated after alignment. Tech B says steering angle sensors requires a scan tool only. Who is correct? Tech A, Tech B, C, or D, neither. So Tech A is correct. A lot of alignment machines have a warning message saying that a lot of the traction control system or the steering angle sensors require calibration after performing an alignment. They even sometimes come with a tool that plugs into the DLC and helps make that process a lot easier. Tech B, he's only half true. He says only, but that's not the case. There are quite a few cars out there that you can calibrate the steering angle sensor by turning the wheel lock to lock, all the way left, all the way right, and usually the light goes out after that. I know a lot of Toyota products, and I've seen some other vehicles do that.
Yeah, that seems to be like a German car thing, I've noticed.
So the correct answer is A, only.
Number 15. A vehicle equipped with electronic power steering is towed in after a rainstorm with a electronic power steering warning message. The most likely cause is A, a weak alternator, B, a weak belt, C, a faulty power steering rack, or D, a blown fuse. So the key to this one is the fact that it's raining. This is going to be kind of one of those things that once you see it, you won't forget it. So with electronic power steering, there's kind of 2 different setups. They have some that have the power steering motor inside the car, like on the steering column, and they just have kind of a generic rack that's on the subframe or the frame or whatever. And then some of them have the motor that is mounted in or on the rack itself. And so the fact that it said after rain means that usually what will happen is water gets up in behind the bellows of the rack and will cause weird, usually there's like a three-phase motor on it, and you usually get weird like resolver codes or something to do with the 3-phase on the rack itself. So alternator, yeah, I mean that could cause it, but you would know pretty much immediately when you crank it up you don't have 14 volts or whatever. So, and I don't think that the rain is really going to affect the alternator working or not. Belt, same thing. You could potentially be slipping on the belt, the alternator be slipping on the belt, not causing the proper voltage to get to the steering rack. But again, it seems like you'd have other issues as well. And blown fuse, I mean, water getting into the rack may have blown the fuse, but that's usually is what's going to be the problem with it. And like I said, once you've seen this one time, you'll never forget it. So it's not super common. Most cars seem to have the motors inside the car, but some of them do have them mounted on the rack.
And this is most likely if they've driven through some probably pretty deep water, because most of the time just being splashed on it doesn't get in there.
Well, I had a Lexus once that it had come in like 3 times, and we had finally pieced together that it was after it had been raining, because it would come in and it would have no codes, or it'd have like history codes, and you'd follow the diag tree and it would tell you to put a power steering ECU in it. So I think either we or another shop had put a power steering ECU in it and was still having the same problem, and eventually pulled the boot back, and you could see there was rust and stuff in it from water getting up in there. So that happens.
Question 16. Which component is responsible for dampening the impact and vibration transmitted to the vehicle body from the road? A, shock absorber, B, steering rack, C, control arm, D, sway bar. All those actually do have some form of technology into it to help prevent noise and vibration from getting into the vehicle. But so in this case, you'd probably want to pick the one that is most likely and that its main job is to do, and that'd be the shock absorber. So question A is correct. Rack and pinion, they've got bushings in it to help prevent any kind of noise and vibrations transferred to the steering wheel. Control arm, they got control arm bushings as well. And sway bar, everything's kind of coated or isolated with some kind of rubber component. So correct answer is A.
17. Two technicians are discussing camber angle effects. Tech A says that camber angle affects the tire's contact patch with the road. Tech B claims that camber adjustments have no effect on tire wear. Who is correct? A, B, both, or neither. So I think we had touched on this a little bit earlier, that camber is negative camber, positive camber, and that's going to affect either the inner or outer edges of a tire. So yes, that is, if you have excessive negative camber, you're going to be basically just riding on the inside part of the tire. And if you have positive camber, you're going to be riding on the outside part of the tire. So yes, it is affecting the contact patch of the tire. So A is correct. B claims that camber adjustments have no effect on tire wear. Absolutely not. Camber is going to, like I just said earlier, it's going to wear the inside or outside of the tire and potentially cause pull if there's a difference. But yes, it's going to wear out tires depending on which way the camber is leaning. So the correct answer is A only.
Question 18. Customer states their vehicle feels loose and unsteady at highway speeds, but normal at low speeds. Which is most likely the cause? A, a weak power steering pump. B, faulty steering angle sensor. C, a faulty vehicle speed sensor. Or D, open fuse for the electronic power steering. So A, power steering pump.
They don't have pumps.
They don't, unless you're a Chrysler product or Nissan. They have electronic hydroelectric. Yeah, that.
I have no idea if that's
they have electric-driven power steering pumps, so they still partially hydraulic. It's just not tied to the belt anymore. You would have probably issues no matter what your speed is. Customer probably say their steering is harder at low speeds. Faulty steering angle sensor, you'd have a different symptom, most likely a warning light of some sort, but that wouldn't be anything related to the power steering assist. B, faulty steering angle sensor. That's possible because the car does want to know kind of when you're turning the wheel, but it's most likely you're just going to have a warning message, and still your power steering would probably still work normal. Usually it's just the warning light. Faulty,
and usually the steering angle sensor is just a follower.
Yeah.
Because it's got a torque input on the motor to see how hard you're trying to turn it. So usually the steering angle sensor is just there to monitor.
It's there to tell the car, the computer, which way you're trying to go. C, faulty vehicle speed sensor. That is very possible because the computer needs to know how fast you're going to how much assist the vehicle needs. D, open fuse. You would have issues all the time. So
it would probably be the exact opposite.
Yeah. So the correct answer is C, faulty vehicle speed sensor, which also usually comes with more warning lights.
Tech A states that a steering damper helps to reduce steering wheel shimmy and vibration. Tech B states that steering damper is mainly used to improve steering response. Who was correct? A, B, both, or neither. So, yeah, a damper, I always call them dampeners. I think they are technically called dampers, but it makes more sense in my reptilian brain to call them dampeners because if you think of like a harmonic balancer, I'm pretty sure it is also called a vibration dampener, isn't it? Or is it a damper?
Dampener.
I feel like they're interchangeable.
Trust me, you don't want to use me for your life.
For
the $1 million question.
I always call them dampeners.
I'm a Dapper Dan man.
Yeah.
And I think of like a vibration dampener or a harmonic balancer on an engine. It's there to try to absorb some of the vibrations. So that's what a damper does, or a dampener does. To reduce steering wheel shimmy and vibration. So yes, they are correct. That's what it does. Tech B claims that the damper is mainly used to improve steering response. It has no effect on steering response whatsoever. So the correct answer is A only.
And people tell me don't be such a dampener on the party. Question 20. What is the purpose of the strut mount in the McPherson strut suspension system? A, to connect the strut to the control arm. B, to cushion the impacts between the strut and the vehicle body. C, to control the alignment of the wheels. D, to provide support for the shock absorber. So A, to connect the strut to the control arm. Most of the time, McPherson struts, they are connected to the knuckle, and then the knuckle is connected to the control arm. To cushion impacts between the strut and the vehicle body. Yeah, because you got your strut, then you got your mount, and then you got the vehicle body. That also allows the strut to pivot. Well, it depends on the McPherson. That allows the strut to pivot. I see, to control the alignment of the wheels. That's not its main purpose, but a lot of times you do have to loosen and move the whole strut, which is up by the strut mount for some alignment angles, for like most likely camber.
Yeah, I mean, if you think of that, it depends. I guess it kind of depends on what you're working on. So if you're working on a Chevy Cobalt or something, yeah, it's going to have an effect on the angle of like the caster and camber. But if you're working on like a Tacoma, it has nothing to do with that.
Yeah. D, to provide support for the shock absorber. Well, now a shock absorber and a strut are technically two different things. So I'm going to say no on the shock absorber, but on the strut, yes, it does provide support for that. But the correct answer is B. It's to cushion impacts between the strut and the vehicle body. Like one of our previous questions, there is a rubber component between the top of the strut and the strut mount that helps to isolate vehicle noise, any kind of road and suspension noise.
21. A vehicle's rear suspension feels excessively bouncy and unstable. Which component might be malfunctioning? A, the rear shock absorbers. B, leaking rear suspension air springs. C, misaligned front suspension. Or D, worn engine mounts. So rule out engine mounts immediately. They have nothing to do with anything. It says C says a misaligned front suspension. We're dealing with a problem in the rear, so you can rule that out. Now, so it kind of comes down to between A and B. A, worn rear shock absorbers. Yeah, that makes perfect sense. You're basically they're just going along for the ride, and the rear suspension's bouncing around, so that makes perfect sense. B, leaking rear air suspension, like airbags. Generally speaking, either you don't notice it at all. The most common thing that you run into with that is that they leak down overnight, like on that BMW that was that what's wrong with that?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, no, that was leaking though.
It was the compressor was bad and one of the springs was leaking. It was leaning.
Oh, so yeah, but if you think, I always think back to like the Ford like Expeditions and stuff that had them, or the old like Crown Victorias that would have them. Is you'd let them sit all night and they'd be squatted down, Carolina squat style.
Or you blow the air spring, you blow them up after you didn't cut the air suspension off, and then you lower the vehicle down and it squatted and blew the airbag out.
But generally speaking, I mean, if it's a slow leak, the compressor kind of keeps up with it, and so that generally doesn't happen. Or if they just blow up, you're riding on nothing.
Bump stops.
And then at that point, you definitely notice it, and it's going to be really, really hard. So A, worn rear shock absorbers makes the most sense, so that's the answer.
Question 22. If a vehicle's steering wheel feels heavy and difficult to turn, which component should be checked first? Power steering fluid level and condition. B, tire alignment. C, battery charge. D, brake fluid level. So right off the bat, you can go ahead and eliminate brake fluid. A, power steering fluid level. Yeah, that I know they're not very specific.
I say they don't say whether it's electric or a hydraulic, so like a battery could be the cause too.
Yeah,
but
it's, if the alternator's not working and its computer's cutting out electronics. B, tire alignment. I think you would have a lot of other conditions, but a really bad alignment can cause, especially like certain kind of caster angles, can cause heavy steering or excessive steering effort. But in this case, I would go with the simple answer, which is check the power steering fluid.
23. What does a broken sway bar link typically cause? A, uneven tire wear. B, poor braking performance. C, excessive body roll during turns. Or D, engine overheating. Rule that one out immediately. It's got nothing to do with that. So it actually is going to very, very, very slightly affect how the distance that it takes to stop. But the question says typically, so you're not going to notice that. Uneven tire wear has got no effect on tires whatsoever. So the answer is C, excessive body roll during turns. So here's your answer.
Question 24. Two technicians are discussing SLA suspension. Tech A says that caster is measured on an SLA suspension through the upper and lower ball joint. Tech B says caster is measured through the upper strut through the lower ball joint. Who is correct? A, B, C, both, or D, neither. So SLA suspension is short, long arm suspension. That is a shorter upper, a lower,
a longer
lower control arm. They both have ball joints, and they don't have your caster angle is measured through the center of the upper and lower ball joints. So Tech A is correct. Tech B, that is not a SLA suspension. That's just a McPherson strut style. So correct answer is Tech A only.
25. When replacing a tie rod end, which alignment angle is most affected? A, camber. B, caster. C, toe. Or D, ride height. So the tie rod ends are mostly responsible for toe, even though it will, if you're a couple miles out, it will affect your caster and your camber. The question is, what's the most affected angle, and that would be toe. Rule out ride height; that has nothing to do with it. But the answer is toe.
Question 26. A vehicle comes in with an uneven ride height, and it has a front torsion bar suspension. Tech A says you need to make the ride height even on both sides before doing alignment. Tech B says no, you just need to do a toe and go. Who is correct? A, B, both, or D, neither. So ride height can affect your alignment. It can affect your toe, it can affect your camber, and it can affect the three main ones and your caster. So you definitely want to help correct the ride height in it, because most torsion bars have adjustments. They usually have it's keyed. Anyway, most torsion bars have an adjustment, and you can to help set your ride height. So that is definitely want to be done before the alignment is performed. So Tech A is correct.
27. After a steering rack replacement, the customer notices that the vehicle turns sharper to the left than to the right. What is the most likely cause? A, a faulty power steering rack. B, a bad steering angle sensor. D, a improperly adjusted alignment. Or D, an improperly installed power steering rack. So, a bad rack, yeah, I don't know that I've ever seen a rack that was bad that turned further one side to the other. Steering angle sensor, again, we had talked about it earlier. That's basically just a follower. It just follows the direction that the wheel wants to go. An alignment, same thing. They're generally even on both sides. whatever the spec is. They're generally going to be even. If not, you might see some that are set up to compensate for road crown, but that's got no effect on how far it turns. Or a misadjusted rack. That is the answer. Now, this is more common on, this is like an Asian car thing. When you go to put the rack in it, on Asian cars, most Asian cars, they're going to have like, let's just say 36 teeth, which means there's 36 different places to put it on. And that is a thing I have seen numerous times. They be 3 or 4 teeth off, and it doesn't really cause any problem with the driving it. And a lot of people don't notice it, but if you get in the car, we say that it's that the rack is not centered. And so what you do is you'll turn it all the way to the left, and it'll be at the, say, 3 o'clock position. You turn it all the way to the right, and it'll be at the 9 o'clock position or something. And that's a dead giveaway that the rack is not installed at the right way. American cars typically don't have that problem because you got to be pretty far out. Most of them are either they'll only go on one way or they'll go on like 90 degrees. And so you got to be pretty far off to get that far. But on Asian cars, you got a lot of opportunity for them to be wrong, and I've seen that plenty of times. So a misadjusted steering rack where the rack meets the steering shaft, that's the most likely answer.
And as a tech, what you can see, you can look at the tie rod ends.
Yeah.
You can look at the threads. Usually the ones are missing.
One side you'll have 3 inches of thread showing, and the other side will have 1 thread showing. Yeah. That's another dead giveaway.
Because the car will drive straight. It's just the odd turning. Question 28. Customer states they have a clunky noise while braking and also from taking off from a stop. Tech A says it can be worn control arm bushings. Tech B says it could be worn sway bar links. Who is correct? Tech A, Tech B, C both, or D neither. So Tech A, that is possible. When you're braking, your control arms can shift. Also, when you accelerate, they can go the opposite direction. I have did that repair recently. It can happen on a lot of different vehicles. Usually, it seems more common on like the McPherson Strut style with just a lower control arm, and then the suspension, because it's usually got the one big bushing to help absorb everything. Tech B, sway bar links. Those tend to make a noise usually when on uneven roads or the vehicle kind of sways real quickly and you kind of get a rapid clunking sound while driving, not braking or accelerating. So the correct answer is Tech A only.
29. Lower control arms are being replaced on a vehicle. Tech A states that the control arm bushings need to be preloaded before tightening. Tech B says that there needs to be an alignment performed on the vehicle. Who is correct? A, B, both, or neither. So, yeah, preloading. You definitely need to preload it before you tighten the bolts down, because if you don't, you run the risk of ripping the control arm bushings. If you have all the weight totally unsprung and you tighten them down, when you put the weight back on the car, you run the risk of ripping those. And also sometimes they'll cause weird like drivability concerns, like it'll want to be kind of wandering around. But even if everything else works out just fine, they're gonna fail prematurely anyway, even if they're good parts, not crappy if they're aftermarket parts, you're putting them on immediately.
They're going to
fail or within a couple weeks. But if you put OEMs on it, they're going to fail prematurely if you don't. B says you got to perform an alignment. Yeah, you're doing suspension work, you got to do an alignment on it. So the answer is C, both.
2 technicians are discussing alignment angles. Tech A says the vehicle will pull to the side with the most camber. Tech B says the vehicle will pull to the side with the most caster. Who is correct? Tech A, Tech B, both, or D, neither. So the rule of thumb is the most camber, least caster. So Tech A says that it'll pull to the side with the most camber. That is true. Tech B says it'll pull to the side with the most caster. That's false. It is the least caster. So the correct answer is Tech A only.
And then you also take into account So if you've got like 3/10 of cross camber going one direction, and you have say 6/10 of cross caster going the other way, the caster, you take the higher of those numbers and go that direction, is that's going to pull. So yeah, most camber, least caster. That's all you got to really remember. So the answer is A only.
I thought I said that. All right, well, that's going to wrap up our first redo of our ASE style videos. Tell us what you think in the comment section.
Yeah, guys, getting these questions took a long time.
Yeah.
To try to get realistic questions.
Well, we also try not to get too specific because ASEs were a little bit more on the generic side. I know we talk about experiences, but they are very wide range in these questions.
So yeah, it took, out of a batch of about 130 questions, we scavenged up 30 that seemed feasible. Anyway, yeah, hopefully you like them. Let us know. We got a lot of feedback on this series, so let us know if you think that these meet the expectations.
Or we just need to fork out the money and buy.
I don't think you can even do that.
You don't think so?
I don't think so.
No.
So, yeah, let us know if you think that these are acceptable or not. If so, we're just picking up where we left off on A4. We'll go to A5, A6, A7, A8, and then if you like them, we'll circle back and do 1, 2, 3 over again. But anyway, guys, that's going to wrap this one up for today. Hopefully you earned a thumbs up from you. Let us know what you think down in the comment section. We have new content for you every single week, so consider subscribing to the channel. And with all that being said, thanks so much for watching. We'll see you on the next one.
May not have all your answers. Hopefully you had some. That being said, see you on the next one.
I'll pick you up at 8. You probably won't be awake. Call yourself an Uber, babe. I'm gonna wait. I'm gonna wait.
Or tell your old lady to get out the truck. Well, I take that back. Anyway, you can cut that part out.
Thanks.